my dream was to play soccer in college. And I put so much of myself into it, but my junior year of high school, I tore my right ACL. My senior year, I tore my left ACL. And the doctors told me I could never play competitive soccer anymore. So overnight, my dreams of playing college soccer were over. And it might sound silly, but everybody called me Soccer Sam. And so I remember asking myself, without soccer, who is Sam? I really had put so much of myself into something that was passing, and when it was gone, I didn't know who I was. So I was having a lot of questions in my own heart, and I started to see a lot of suffering touch those closest to me. My great uncle Tom, who was like my grandfather figure, because my grandpa passed away when I was 3. So my great uncle kind of stepped in as my grandfather figure, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer right before I graduated high school. And then I had other close family members who were really struggling with mental health, and I began questioning, not if God was real. I always believed that God was real, but I started questioning if he was good. And like, if there's all this suffering going on around me, around others, so much suffering in the world, is God really good? And I didn't really know God, so I didn't have any relationship to fall back on, and so I started having a lot of doubts in my heart. And I went away to college with the desire to be a special education teacher. Ever since I was in 4th grade, I knew I wanted to study special education and to be a special education teacher. So I went to school and I joined almost every special ed club on campus. There were a lot of them. And I kept myself very busy. And I kind of pushed those questions aside, but in the silence, those questions were still rolling around in my mind and my heart. And so my first year of college, my Uncle Tom was moved to hospice. And in that moment, I started struggling a lot more with my faith. And I remember I didn't know how to pray, but I went to the window and, God, if you're really out there and if you're really good, don't let Uncle Tom die. He believes in you. And a few weeks later, I found out that he had passed away. So my temperament, I don't get angry very easily, but in that moment, I became very angry. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to handle it. And I went to his funeral very angry. I wanted nothing to do with my faith, nothing to do with God. That's kind of the last straw for me. And so I was at his funeral angry, and in the middle of the Mass, the priest was talking about what a man of God my uncle was, and I'm listening to all this, and I heard not like a booming voice from heaven, but it was a voice so clear in my heart that I knew didn't come from me. Return to Sunday Mass. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm angry? Why am I going to come back to Sunday Mass? Like, that doesn't make any sense, but it was so strong in my heart, come back to Sunday Mass. So I was like, I don't know what's happening, I'm angry, I'm just going to forget that, you know? And so I continued through the funeral, and at the end, it was in a cathedral in Chicago, and the cathedral's a little bit darker. But when the cathedral doors opened, as they were about to exit the church with my uncle's body, all the light from outside flooded into the cathedral. And as the light flooded in, really I received such a grace of light in my heart that in one instant, I went from angry to I had so much peace, and I just understood that my Uncle Tom was okay, that everything, that he was at peace, that he was okay, that he was with God. And at this point, I had no idea what was going on inside of me. There were all these things happening, and I was like, that was really strange. So I went back to school, and I kind of forgot about it. And a couple months later, I was working a club for one of those special ed clubs that I was on, that I participated in, and we were at this event. It's in winter in Illinois, so it's dark, so we're in a closed building. It's kind of dark. There's like crazy music going on, disco balls, because it's an event for transfer students to come and see what they can be a part of. So it was a unique scene. All of a sudden I see a religious sister walking by. And I had never seen a religious sister before. I didn't know they actually existed. I was on a public university. So the last thing I was expecting to see in this event was a religious sister walking by. So my jaw dropped, and she turned and looked at me, and I smiled, not to be rude. Since I smiled, she came over and started talking to me. And so she introduced me to the young woman next to her, who later would become my sister, and said that there's a Catholic center on campus, and they invited me to come to Bible study, and that there's a retreat that they were having. And it was another one of those moments I didn't really understand what was happening in the moment, but my heart was on fire. And now I can look back and understand I was meeting my family for the first time, but I didn't know that then, I didn't understand that. And she told me that she tells every special education, every nursing major, that we have very hard professions, and that we're going to need our faith to fall back on. And if we don't build it now while we're in college, when we need it, we're not going to have it. And I wanted to do everything I needed to do to be a good special education teacher. So the Lord uses all things, and I was like, okay, if this is what I need to do to be a good special education teacher, then maybe I should try. So I started going to the Bible studies, but as you saw in the game, I wouldn't stay. I would come for a little bit and leave early for one of my special ed clubs. I wouldn't even say it's 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I was kind of one toe in, the rest of me out. But something that really caught my attention was the joy that everybody had there. They had this incredible joy, and they always looked so happy. And I remember thinking, I want that. Like, I don't want to be one of them. I don't want to be a church kid, but I want their joy. And so they kept inviting me to go on a retreat. On a retreat, I told them no, probably 100 times. And the night before, I made a last-minute decision to go. And on that retreat, I encountered the Lord in the Eucharist for the first time. I know many of you were with us on the Arise retreat a couple weeks ago, and Saturday night, how we had the time of adoration, and then Father processed with the monstrance between each person. It was similar to that. And that night, we sang, apparently for almost an hour, and didn't feel that long to me, the song Good, Good Father. And that was so much what I had in my heart, is God really good? And so much of what I was battling with is, so we were singing it. I'm pretty sure we sang it that long just for me. I'm very grateful. I didn't know that. But my heart started to open just a little bit as we were singing it. And with that opening, towards the end, we sang another song, Who Am I, by Casting Crowns. And in that song, if you haven't heard it, it's basically like, who am I that the Lord of all the earth sees me in my sin and my brokenness and loves me. And it's not because of who I am or what I've done, but it's because of who He is and what He's done. And so it talks about a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow. And in that moment, with so much clarity, I understood that it was me. Like, I kind of go to Bible study, but not really. I leave. I started going back to Sunday Mass, but as a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow. There's no constancy in my relationship with God. And that really pierced my heart. And towards the end, it said, and you told me who I am yours. And that was the other question. Who's Soccer Sam without soccer? I'm His. I belong to God. And so in that moment, it was similar to the funeral, just an infused grace of understanding that God had been faithful my whole life, and I was the one who was unfaithful. I wasn't pursuing Him. I wasn't seeking a relationship with Him. He had been there through everything in my life, and I was the one who was unfaithful. And so that night I made the first authentic prayer of my life, which was, God, you've been so faithful, and I've been so unfaithful that I don't want to be anymore. And with that, the Lord took that prayer and my life changed completely. I left that retreat and I started going to Mass every day. I used to go twice a year, so it's a pretty big change. I started reading the Bible every day for the first time. I started praying the rosary, the chaplet, fasting, going to confession. We had the Holy Doors because the Extraordinary Jubilee Year of Mercy at the Newman Center, so I passed through them every day. I had found the love that I was looking for, and I didn't want anything else. So everything that anyone told me would bring me closer to God, I did it. I just wanted to be closer to Him. So my life started changing completely. And towards the end of that semester, there's a young woman who is kind of walking with me. She had graduated, but she'd still come to the Newman Center, and she's a special education teacher, and she had the exact classroom that I wanted to teach in. So I was so excited because one night she shared her testimony at the Bible study, and she's sharing her testimony, it's so beautiful, and all of a sudden she started talking about religious life. And then she said that she was going to stop teaching at the end of the year and enter the convent. I'm like, wait a minute. And so after that, there's a lot in her story, even though we've lived completely different lives, that I could relate to and understand. So I realized that I never really asked God what His plan was for my life. I knew since 4th grade I wanted to be a special ed teacher, and I was very determined, and I was going to do whatever it took to be a special education teacher. But for the first time, I realized that I had never asked God what He created me for. And with that question, it came with a lot of fear, to be honest, in my heart, because I had my plan, I had everything in place, I was walking towards it, and the idea of opening my heart to a complete change of a vocation that I didn't know anything about was really scary. But I realized that one day, like all of us, we're going to meet the Lord face to face. And I don't want to get to the end of my life and meet the Lord and see this amazing plan of love that He had for my life. And I never opened my heart to it because I was too scared to change my plans, to open myself up to the unknown. And I realized that that was more terrifying to me than the idea of really asking God what He created me for. The idea of getting to the end of my life and realizing I did my own plan and I wasted the amazing plan of love that he had for my life was more scary than just asking him what he made me for. So with that, I started to actually ask with an open heart. And as I was reading the scriptures, I'd read things like the passage of the poor widow who just had 2 coins. And Jesus saw her give both those 2 coins, was her whole livelihood, all she had, into the treasury of the temple. And he said, from her poverty, she has given her whole livelihood. And I'd read passages like that, and it's like my heart would start burning within me. And I was understanding the desires that were written in my heart through the scriptures. And all of them pointed towards religious life, of giving the totality of my life, all that I am, to the Lord and living for him. And so as I was realizing that, it was becoming more and more clear through the scriptures that what was written in my heart pointed to a religious vocation. But I allowed myself to believe a lot of lies that were not allowing me to fully accept that. Believing that God couldn't really want me, that I was just making this up, that's not real, I just want it to be true. So I was kind of going on this battle between my heart, between what was so clear in the scriptures and in my prayer, and the lie that it couldn't be true, that God couldn't really want someone like me. And then in January 22nd, 2017, it was a Sunday Mass, and the gospel that day was the calling of the first 4 apostles. And the priest said during his homily afterwards that the apostles weren't extraordinary people, they were fishermen. And at the time of Jesus, that was pretty much as average as it got. There's nothing special about being a fisherman, but God chose them, and that's what mattered. And so he looked at us and said, with all his priestly authority, you can never let your ordinariness, your averageness, your littleness, whatever it is, stop you from doing what God has called you to. And that cut straight through to my heart. And in that moment, I understood, I think this is real, and I need to surrender my life to this mystery. And I had this image of, like, I was standing on a shore, and there are 2 boats in front of me, the 2 vocations, religious life and marriage. And everything seemed to be pointing to this one boat. And I can stand on the shore the rest of my life wondering what if I'm wrong and never get on the boat. Or at some point, I'm going to have to walk in faith in the conviction that the Lord has repeatedly said to me, and trust that if I'm wrong, that he's going to turn the boat around and help me to understand what he made me for. So in that moment at communion that day, I gave my yes to the Lord. And we sang the summons, and You Are Mine after that. I'm not sure why, it was a Sunday Mass, but I was just crying and crying, which I'm sure looked a little strange. You don't normally see that in Sunday Mass. But I understood that it was real, that the Lord was really calling me. And I've had a longer journey, so it took a little bit. There's a lot that I need to work through in financial realities and health realities, but at last we've come to this day, and so it's been a beautiful adventure of love, and I look very forward to, in a few days, being able to finally walk in the fulfillment of that yes, of being able to give myself totally to the Lord.